Chapter 9, The Ghost in the Data. The screen on the primary tactical console split in two. The green military interface was violently overwritten by a cascading stream of white medical data, genetic sequencing charts, and three-dimensional renders of an icosahedron virus model. At the top of the screen, a text line blinked in a steady, frantic rhythm. Source: ArcLight Underwater Research Facility, Sublevel 4. Author: Dr. Elena Vance. Status: compromised. Emergency broadcast active. Vance froze. His heart slammed against his ribs like a trapped bird. Elena! Captain? Maya looked up, noticing the sudden rigidity in his posture. Do you know this research station? It's a classified deep-sea facility under the North Sea. The signal is being rerouted through a surface communications buoy. That's my sister, Vance said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. He hadn't seen or heard from her since the outbreak began in October. She had been swallowed by the black budget sector of the Ministry of Defense. He had assumed she was dead, buried in whatever initial containment failure had started this apocalypse. She's alive, Maya said, her eyes scanning the data stream. Or, she was when this sequence started transmitting 5 minutes ago. Captain, she's not sending a distress call. She's sending the core architecture of the Lazarus strain. Look at the highlighted sequence. On the screen, a section of the viral DNA model was flashing in amber. She found the resonance trigger, Maya explained, her fingers tracing the code. The virus operates like a hive mind because it uses a specific bioelectric frequency to link the host brains together. Elena found the exact frequency that forces the virus to enter a hyperaccelerated cellular degradation state. It's a self-destruct sequence for the pathogen. If we broadcast that signal. Vance began. If we broadcast it at a high enough wattage, we don't just kill the infected in the room, we fry the entire local network. It would collapse the nervous systems of every resurgent within range of the transmitter. Maya's face fell as she looked at the signal strength indicator. But the transmission from the ArcLight facility just cut off. The data packet is incomplete. The terminal sequence, the execution command for the trigger, is missing. Thump. Thump. Crack. A massive impact shook the forward bow of the submarine. On the external camera feed, the water in the drydock had risen to the lip of the catwalks. A group of resurgent had managed to drop from the overhead crane directly onto the top deck of the HMS Vanguard. They were hammering on the external escape hatch with a heavy steel maintenance wrench they had scavenged from the floor. The steel of the hatch was thick, but the hydraulic seal indicators were already flashing from green to amber. They're bypassing the manual lock, a soldier yelled from the lower deck. They're turning the wheel from the outside. Vance drew his rifle, his eyes shifting from the monitor displaying his sister's incomplete cure to the door that stood between his remaining crew and total annihilation. Lynn, engage the electric drive. Back us out of this pen right now, Vance ordered. We're going to the coordinates of that research facility. Sir, the facility is 200 miles out in the deep trenches, Maya said, her hands throwing the thruster levers forward. And the facility's structural telemetry on this feed is showing zero integrity. It's flooding. Then we dive, Vance said, his voice like iron. If my sister is down there with the rest of that code, we drag her out of the dark. Or we die trying. Chapter 10, The Abyssal Architects. The HMS Vanguard cleared the concrete mouth of the Scapa pens, slipping into the black, unyielding waters of the Atlantic Current. The transition from the shallow bay to the deep continental shelf was marked by a sudden, oppressive silence. The sound of the hammering on the hull died away, replaced by the deep, rhythmic hum of the submarine's propeller blades cutting through the deep. Depth, 100 meters, Maya announced, her eyes fixed on the depth gauge. The infected on the hull have been stripped off by the current speed, Captain. We are clear in the water column. Run a passive sonar sweep, Vance said, standing over the central plot table. Find the ArcLight buoy. Passive sonar pinging. Maya paused. The headset against her ear rattled with a bizarre, clicking interference. She pulled it off, her face completely pale. Captain, the sonar isn't picking up topography. It's picking up structures. Structures? We're in the middle of the North Sea basin. There's nothing out here but flat silt and oil rigs. Look at the screen. Vance leaned over the display. The passive sonar sweep had rendered a three-dimensional acoustic map of the seabed 50 miles ahead. It wasn't flat. Rising from the ocean floor, at a depth of 300 meters, was a massive, geometric pyramid. It was miles wide at the base, constructed of millions of individual, interlocking shapes that the sonar could not cleanly define. "That's not stone," Vance whispered, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. "And it's not metal." Maya zoomed in on the acoustic return. The interlocking shapes weren't uniform blocks. They were organic. Millions of resurgent had marched off the coastlines of Europe, walked into the sea, and instead of wandering aimlessly, they had gathered on the ocean floor. They had linked their limbs, their bodies, their frozen bones together, building a colossal, biological antenna that stretched from the abyssal plain toward the surface. The hive mind wasn't just trying to survive. It was building a monument. It was building a cradle for whatever was coming next. And right in the center of that organic mountain of the dead lay the blinking red light of the ArcLight facility. Chapter 11, The Pilgrimage of the Mute. January 17, 2026. Deep Sea Trench, the North Sea Basin. Depth, 280 meters. The HMS Vanguard glided through the abyssal midnight like a blind shark, its active sonar silenced to avoid alerting the nightmare ahead. The only illumination came from the faint, sickly violet glow radiating from the ocean floor. A light generated by trillions of bioluminescent Lazarus cells pulsing in perfect, terrifying synchronization. Depth, 290 meters, Maya whispered, her hands white-knuckled on the ballast controls. The water pressure outside is nearly 30 atmospheres. If we hit one of those columns, the hull will collapse like a stepped-on soda can. Through the forward observation array, the true horror of the seabed materialized. The sonar hadn't lied. The pyramid wasn't a random pile of corpses, it was an architectural marvel of flesh and bone. Millions of infected had formed massive, twisted pillars, locking their arms and legs together in a desperate, frozen embrace. These columns spiraled upward like the ribs of a cathedral, supporting a central dome that hovered directly over the ruins of the ArcLight facility. They were dead, yet they were moving. A slow, rhythmic rippling effect passed through the walls of the flesh pyramid. A collective respiration of a hive mind that didn't need oxygen, but required energy. "They're channeling the geothermal heat from the vents," Vance remarked, his eyes locked onto the thermal overlay. "The virus is using the planet's own thermal energy to power the biological broadcast. Look at the core temperature of that structure." The display showed a localized spike of hot water rising right from the center of the pyramid. The hive mind was creating an organic engine. "Captain," one of the remaining crewmen called out from the tactical station. "The ArcLight facility is directly beneath the central dome. The structural telemetry shows the main laboratory, sublevel 4, is fully flooded, but the emergency escape module at the top tower is still holding an atmospheric bubble. Someone is triggering the manual pressure valves from inside." "Elena," Vance muttered. He turned to the remaining soldiers. "Suits on. We're taking the locked lockout chamber." We dive into the facility. "Sir, we can't use standard scuba gear at this depth," Maya said, her eyes flashing with panic. "The partial pressure of oxygen will kill us instantly. The sub carries 3 atmospheric diving suits, the hardshell EXOs. Only 3 of us can go." "Then it's you, me, and Miller," Vance said, referring to the veteran sergeant who had survived the retreat from Gate Charlie. "The rest of you stay on the boat. If that door shifts, or if the hive mind notices our presence, you torpedo the structural pillars and clear a path out of here. Do not wait for us." Chapter 12, The Deep SEA Cage. The transition from the pressurized lockout chamber of the submarine into the freezing, pitch-black water of the North Sea felt like stepping into another dimension. Vance's world shrank to the interior of his heavy, armored EXO suit. The joints of the titanium exoskeleton groaned against the crushing pressure of the deep sea. His breath echoed loudly in the confined helmet, mixed with the electronic hum of the internal life support fans. "Comms check," Vance said, his voice distorted by the radio synthesizer. "I'm here, Captain," Maya's voice crackled back. Her suit's external lights cut a twin beam of bright white through the murky, violet-tinged water. "Visual on the arc light escape tower," Miller reported. "It's about 50 meters ahead. But look at the columns, sir. We're walking right through the legs of the beast." They moved using the suit's microthrusters, drifting slowly through the gaps in the living architecture. Up close, the detail was stomach-churning. The resurgent making up the pillars were completely naked, their clothes long since rotted away or stripped by the currents. Their skin had turned into a thick, blubber-like white substance, and their mouths were locked wide open, letting the salt water circulate through their dead lungs. As Vance drifted past a pillar, a head suddenly snapped toward him. The eyes, glowing with that intense violet fire, locked onto his flashlight beam. The fingers of the creature twitched, reaching out toward the titanium forearm of his suit. "Don't panic, don't shoot," Vance warned, his heart rate spiking to 140 beats per minute on the suit's internal monitor. "They are operating on a macro signal. Right now, we are just background noise to them. Keep moving toward the airlock." They reached the exterior hatch of the arc light escape tower. The facility looked like a crushed soda can, the lower levels were completely pancake flat under the weight of the ocean and the corpses above. Only the reinforced steel tower remained intact, wedged between two massive pillars of the dead. Vance cleared a layer of black, oily sludge from the manual control panel of the airlock. He connected the suit's auxiliary battery to the port. Click-clack. The outer door groaned open, a vortex of bubbles escaping into the sea. The three divers filed inside, and the hatch slammed shut behind them. The sound of water being pumped out by the emergency backup system filled their helmets, replaced gradually by the hiss of stale, toxic air. Vance popped the seals on his helmet, swinging the heavy titanium visor open. The air inside the tower smelled of electrical fire, ozone, and wet decay. "Elena," he shouted into the dark corridor. A flickering emergency light illuminated the end of the hallway. A figure emerged from the shadows, clutched in a heavy thermal blanket, her hands shaking violently as she held a heavy industrial flare tool. "Mark?" Elena Vance whispered, her eyes sunken, her lips blue from hypothermia. She dropped the tool, her legs giving out. Vance caught her in his massive titanium arms, the hard shell of his suit contrasting with her frail, shivering frame. Chapter 14, The Sovereign Frequency. January 17, 2026. Inside the Arclight Escape Tower. Depth, 310 meters. The walls groaned. The titanium plates of the diving suits hummed in sympathy with the deep, vibrating frequency tearing through the ocean floor. The acoustic pressure was so intense that the stale air inside the flooded tower rippled with visible microwaves. "The cosmic signal, it's a structural template," Elena gasped, her teeth chattering violently as Maya wrapped a chemical heat pack around her neck. "The virus isn't a weapon meant to erase us. It's a terraforming tool. It's preparing the biosphere." "For what?" Mark Vance asked, his fingers tightening on the collar of his hardshell suit. "For whatever sent it," she whispered, pointing a trembling hand toward a cracked tactical terminal flickering in the corner. "The Lazarus 7 strain doesn't just animate tissue, it organizes it. Look at the data stream. The signal hitting the pyramid right now is instructing the network to begin the second phase, biomass consolidation." Mark looked at the monitor. The genetic architecture was shifting. The icosahedron structure of the virus was unraveling, rebuilding itself into a tight, linear helix that resembled an artificial neural network. "They aren't just building a satellite dish, Mark," Elena said, her eyes wide with terror. "They are building a nervous system. The pillars, the pyramid, it's all fusing into a single, macroscopic organism. If that cosmic transmission finishes downloading, the hive mind achieves complete autonomous consciousness. Earth becomes a closed loop. We won't even be memories. The trigger code, Elena, Vance said, his voice dropping into a hard, unyielding register. How do we deploy the kill switch? Elena reached into her thermal blanket, pulling out a heavy, waterproof solid-state drive. The sequence is complete on this drive. I managed to isolate the self-destruct protein marker before the lower levels flooded. But the facility's internal transmitters are dead. The submarine's tactical array is too weak to punch through the biological density of the pyramid's outer dome. Maya stepped forward, her armored fingers gently taking the drive from Elena. We have to use the pyramid itself. Mark frowned. Explain, Lynn. The organic pillars. They are designed to conduct bioelectric signals, Maya said, her eyes flashing with tactical realization. They are acting as natural fiber optic cables. If we can inject this data sequence directly into the main neural nexus, the apex of the pyramid where the thermal vents meet the biological dome, the Horde will broadcast our virus to itself. It will turn their own network against them. And where exactly is this nexus? Sergeant Miller asked, his hand resting on his sidearm. Maya tapped the terminal, bringing up the acoustic map. A single, pulsing purple node glowed at the very top of the flesh dome, 300 meters out in the crushing blackness of the abyssal plain. Right there, Maya said quietly. On the outside. At the center of the storm. I told you I'd find you, he murmured, his voice cracking. You shouldn't have come, Elena gasped, clutching his armored chest. The transmission. The virus didn't just build this pyramid to send a signal to the world. It's a receiver, Mark. It's waiting for a response. Chapter 13, The Echo from the Stars. January 17, 2026. Command Deck, HMS Vanguard. Inside the submarine, the tactical screens began to malfunction. The emerald green lines were replaced by a massive, pulsing waveform that filled every monitor on the bridge. Captain, come in. We have a major event happening on the surface buoy feed. The communications officer shouted into the radio uplink to the tower. There was no response from Vance, the concrete and flesh of the pyramid were shielding the radio waves. On the main tracking display, the global map was no longer showing the movement of the infected on Earth. The satellite uplink, before it died completely, had captured a final data packet from the high-altitude arrays. A low-frequency radio signal was hitting the Earth's atmosphere. But it wasn't originating from a military base or a rogue faction. The source coordinates were located in deep space, a precise, focused burst of gamma radiation originating from the outer rim of the solar system, pointing directly at the North Sea basin. The Lazarus 7 virus had never been a human invention. The mutation in the clean room of Sector 4 hadn't been an accident of biology. It was the activation of a dormant, genetic seed that had been buried in the human genome for millennia, waiting for the technology level of the species to reach the point where it could be unlocked. The Pyramid of the Dead on the ocean floor was a biological satellite dish, constructed to receive the second phase of the infection. Outside the HMS Vanguard, the pillars of the dead stopped rippling. Trillions of violet eyes turned upward toward the surface of the water. The collective hissing of the Horde grew so intense that the submarine's hull began to vibrate with the frequency, a deafening, metallic ring that drove the crew to their knees, their ears bleeding from the acoustic pressure. The dead were no longer hunting humanity. They were listening.